Madagascar was once home to all sorts of wonderful, incredibly unique megafauna, and some of these megafaunal animals would exist until as little as 500 years ago. But one sticks out among all the rest as being by far the most interesting and unique to me, that being the Voay, the man-eating horned crocodile of Madagascar. Voay Robustus, also known as the horned crocodile, was arguably the last of all the terrestrial crocodiles, and possibly the closest thing humanity's ever encountered to a real-life dragon. They also lived shockingly close to modern day, with the native Madagascar people even claiming that the Voay existed alongside the Madagascar Nile crocodile up until the 1800s. But despite sightings persisting till this day, which we'll get to later, current estimates put the Voay's extinction at about 700 AD, which is actually closer to modern day than the fall of the Roman Empire, which just goes to show how close these terrifying yet also magnificent creatures were to living in modern day. The Voay was very unique for a lot of different reasons, ranging from its incredibly pronounced squamosal bones, which were believed to primarily be for display, all the way down to just how robust its skull was. Its species name Robustus comes from just how robust the skull of this crocodilian truly was, with the skull of the Voay actually weighing even more than that of the saltwater crocodile's skull. This goes to show just how robust the Voay truly was, especially when you remember the fact that the saltwater crocodile actually got a good bit larger than the Voay, with the Voay's current maximum size estimate being at about 13 feet, which is still dwarfed by the saltwater crocodile's 20-foot maximum. Still, pound for pound, the Voay was likely much more muscular, as it needed more muscle in order to support its body weight on land. After all, the horned crocodile did have much bulkier, longer legs than any modern-day crocodilian, which in a way would only help to contribute more to its incredibly unique build. While its bite force cannot be calculated, it was likely very high, based on its size and bone density, which would make it even better adapted for hunting terrestrial prey. As stated earlier in the video, the Voay wasn't the only large animal existing at the time in Madagascar. Madagascar was also home to two different species of elephant bird, in addition to giant lemurs, the giant fossa, and its own very unique species of hippo, all of which were fairly large and likely would fall victim to the Voay. And while there's currently no direct evidence, based on what we currently know about crocodilian behavior, it wouldn't be too surprising if the Voay also preyed on the native peoples of Madagascar, at least on the occasion. It's very hard to know for sure though, as it's very hard to tell the difference between what are tales passed down by native peoples from generation to generation and what's absolute fact. We also don't have much to compare the Voay to in terms of lifestyle. The closest thing to it in modern day would be the Cuban crocodile, which is the most terrestrial of all the true crocodiles, but the Cuban crocodile was much smaller and believed to be a much more social species. Also, due to its more robust build, it's still believed that the Voay spent even more time on land. An interesting thing to note though is that both the Voay and the Cuban crocodile also share the same features of having incredibly present squamosal bones, something which is only really seen today in such prevalence in some Nile crocodile populations, the Siamese crocodile, and as stated before, the Cuban crocodile. Yet this feature was once found all across the crocodilian family tree in the past, from alligators all the way to a variety of different crocodile species and even some of the more ancient land crocs. Though nowadays it's mostly just the typical crocodiles, crocodilians, which have this feature to some extent. This leads me into my next point about what makes the Voay so unique, that being its placement on the crocodilian phylogenetic tree. Right now, while it's still up for debate, it is currently believed that the Voay is most closely related to the typical crocodiles crocodilians, which includes what you usually think of when it comes to crocodiles, though it was originally believed to be more closely related to the dwarf crocodiles of West Africa, due to their similarities in their skull structures, though this has been disproven by DNA testing. Odds are that the ancestor of the Crocodilians genus and the Voay genus originally swam to Madagascar back when the distance between Madagascar and Africa was much smaller. And over time, as water levels rose, the Voay's ancestor, in addition to many other species, would likely become isolated on the island of Madagascar and begin to evolve into their very own unique forms, some of which are still around today. Eventually, though, relatively recently, likely due to changing ocean currents, the Nile crocodile would also colonize the island of Madagascar. Despite Nile crocodiles not having salt glands the same way American or true saltwater crocodiles do have, the Nile crocodile is still an incredibly durable species and likely would have been able to survive in the open ocean for a decent period of time, just enough to where they'd be able to eventually travel all the way to Madagascar. And while it is debated how much the Nile crocodile did compete with the horned crocodile, since they both fed on megafauna somewhat regularly, there was likely a decent bit of competition between the two species. Still, they were fairly different in how they hunted their prey. In case you haven't seen every other nature documentary that's ever taken place in Africa, the Nile crocodile is an opportunistic ambush predator that will eat almost anything from zebras to even humans and the much smaller turtles and fish found in their river systems. And currently, while it is highly debated and we could never know for sure, it is believed that the Voay would have likely hunted its prey on land, going for more of a combination of an initial ambush followed by a short chase or pursuit, ending with the Voay either having its meal or the meal getting away. Also, despite being shorter in length, the Voay would have likely needed more food in order to sustain itself compared to the Nile crocodile, in part due to its terrestrial lifestyle, which essentially means that the horned crocodile likely had a faster metabolism than any of our modern-day crocodilians, but was still likely cold-blooded, unlike some of the other crocodilomorphs of the past. For this reason, the horned crocodile likely relied on Madagascar's megafauna in order to keep itself sustained. So when humans arrived on Madagascar's shores and slowly began to deplete Madagascar's megafaunal wildlife, the Voay's numbers would eventually decrease and go extinct. Though unlike a lot of other places such as New Zealand, when humans initially arrived onto Madagascar's shores, they were able to coexist with the many unique creatures that inhabited Madagascar for a very long period of time. And for this reason, it is also believed that climate change also likely played a factor. After all, some of these creatures, like the giant lemur, which was a lemur almost the same size as a gorilla, could have lived as recently as 500 years ago. The same applies with the Voay, which according to many of the Malagasy people lived up until the 1800s when Europeans arrived. And already with Madagascar having one incredibly mysterious population of cave Nile crocodiles, it has been suggested that there's a very small possibility that the Voay could still be surviving till this day in these very same caves. But that remains to be confirmed, as sightings, while they do exist, are highly uncredible. But there's still a chance that the Voay could still be alive in the gene pool of Madagascar's modern-day Nile crocodile population. One thing which is very unique about the Madagascar locality of Nile crocodile is actually the fact that their squamosal bones are found to be more prominent than those of other subspecies or localities found on the African mainland. And while unlikely, as there's currently no known examples of crocodilian hybridization from different genuses, there is still a chance that some of the last of the Voay did end up hybridizing with the Nile crocodile seen in Madagascar, which could explain some of the more unique traits the Madagascar Nile crocodile population has in modern day. There's also the very small possibility that we could decide to clone this species in the future, as Voay Robustus did die recently enough to where we do have access to some of its genetic code. But if we'll ever actually clone the Voay or any of Madagascar's other very unique megafauna species remains to be seen. Regardless though, what does matter is that we continue to protect our modern day incredibly unique crocodilian species so we could enjoy them for generations to come. And if you guys enjoyed this video, please feel free to like and subscribe, and if this video does well enough, I might make an entirely separate video about some of Madagascar's other incredibly unique extinct animal species. So in the meantime, thank you for your money, and goodbye.